So I'm not sure whether you can hear it, but there's a lot of snoring going on here. Quiet snoring, because it's the dormancy period. Hi everyone, welcome back to my greenhouse, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joe. I'm in my greenhouse full of cacti and other succulent plants here, but you'll notice I'm standing here not just in a t-shirt as usual, but with a bit of a jacket on. It is pretty cool in here, 6 degrees centigrade, and it's pretty dark. You're possibly even hearing the rain that is tapping on the roof of the greenhouse. And we're well into November here. November here on the northern hemisphere means we're into the dormancy period, the break, the growing break, if you like, that many cacti and other succulent plants have. And it is a period where a lot of our plants are actually resting, so they're not actively growing. And it's a really important time of the year because this is the break that these plants need in order to be revitalized and ready to grow and bloom again in the next upcoming growing season next spring. So let me give you a little bit of a November update. Now, talking of humidity, all of my cacti will be standing completely dry. They actually had their last watering in October, which is relatively late. It was late October, and it's because we had a very mild autumn, very mild fall period here. And so I managed to squeeze in, if you like, a final watering in October, light watering, and that was, I think, still well received by the plants. But since then, they have been standing completely dry, and that's what they will be until late March, sometime early April, when they actually get their first watering again, light watering initially, and then I start to slightly increase as we head into spring. But at the moment, all the plants, all the cacti are standing bone dry, not a drop of water. And will they shrivel? Yes, a little bit. They will. Some actually shrivel more than others, and with some, you can really very visibly see how the volume of the plant actually reduces, how they shrink and how they shrivel. Some of the cacti are actually, quite into that mode of shriveling during the dry period. Others, you will hardly see a difference. It's just amazing how well cacti are actually, able to live through very, very prolonged periods of arid conditions. So basically, no watering, no precipitation. There are some exceptions to the no watering rule, and that's with a number of my epiphytic cacti. So these are cacti that originally in nature, they will be growing a little bit like orchids on trees, and they will be often originating from slightly more humid slightly warmer climates, and they will get a little bit of water every now and then from me. So they will be watered, and that actually helps them, just basically grow through the winter. They could very often also just grow without any water as well, but they will then sometimes start um, dropping parts of their stems, parts of the plants. And here we've got a rhipsalis, and this rhipsalis, because it's now standing relatively dry and cool, it is also now developing. You can see these little white tufts here. These are all buds, and it will then be bursting into beautiful blooms in a few weeks' time. There are also other plants, other succulents like the elephant's foot, and that is a plant that actually continues to grow throughout the winter months. And it's actually, you know, it will also receive a little bit of water occasionally during this period. And it's amazing how, out of this well protected main part of the plant, we get these vines that shoot off, and I I let them grow across parts of my greenhouse. So I have these wonderful lush green leaves growing along some of the shelf areas. And these are all the leaves coming off the main plant. Something else, of course, that I do is I regularly, at the moment, if not daily, then at least every other day, I'll be in the greenhouse. I'll be taking a look at the plants. I'll be inspecting them, so to speak, for any potential pests, uh, fungi, perhaps. There's a number of cacti that are a little prone to getting some fungi, either infections or just fungi sitting on their areoles. This Cactus glaucescens, for example, you can see the very latest, so the youngest areoles from this year. Remember, a cactus always grows out of the central growth axis, out of that central area. That's where the youngest spines and areoles will be. If you're asking yourself, what's he going on about these areoles? Well, areoles are these little cushiony areas that every cactus typically has, out of which the spines typically will grow. So those are areoles, and they're very typical for cacti. Now, some plants like this cactus last winter actually had a number of areoles that turned black. You can see that here. And that's because there's a fungus that will sometimes start growing on some of these areoles. Um, Nothing too dramatic in this case, but still something you want to be watching, and something that you might even sometimes I treat these areas on the plant with a special fungicide, just to make sure that the fungi doesn't actually spread to other parts of the plant. But that's not something that happens, luckily, too often. Um, if plants are standing in high humidity and a bit damp, then of course they are more prone to being attacked by some sort of fungus. Okay, so checking the plants for pests and fungi. Now, when it comes to pests, I suppose the most notorious and common one to be looking out for during the winter months are the mealybugs. And let me just check. I think here I may actually have spotted one. Let me just zoom in a little bit. You see that white little spot there in between the areoles of this beautiful fellow cactus? Well, that is probably a mealybug. Let me just double check with. Well, actually, luckily, it turns out that this little white spot isn't even a mealybug. It is a little pebble that got caught on the top of the plant. So something which I can remove just with a little bit of technology here. But you get the hang of it. It's little unusual spots, little unusual areas, if you like, that one finds on the outer skin, on the epidermis, often towards the base of the plants. And that's where, it's really important to always be checking for especially mealybugs that really start to uh, multiply during the winter months. Now, the other activity that is important during this time of the year is clearing plants of the dried flowers, the old flowers and fruits of the last growing season. And here you can see between my fingers, this is a old flower dried up. And of course, if the flowers were pollinated, they will often have uh, generated seeds. And what you're seeing here are actually cactus seeds. This is a fruit that has opened up, and it's got the black, shiny little cactus seeds that are ripe and actually ready to be sown and ready for germination in the coming spring. But they need to be carefully collected. They need to be cleaned of um, any dried up parts of the fruit. What's important is that the seeds are carefully collected and labeled with the name, of course, of the mother plant, so that we know what or which type of seeds they are, which plant the seeds are from, so that as we're sowing them next year, perhaps also passing them on to fellow hobbyists and growers, we can always be sure of the genus and the species, so the name of the cactus that the seeds originate from. But you can see I still have a fair amount of work to do here, clearing some of these old dried up flowers from the blooms of the last season. So something else that I do during this time of the year is that I check and update the labels, the plant labels, the name labels on the plants, and I write in many cases new ones, and plants that were acquired during the last year will receive new plant labels with the with a numbering system that corresponds to the numbering system of my collection. So the plant labels will of course have the full names of the plant, but they'll also carry a code number that allows me to keep track of that particular plant, and then it also allows me to monitor, for example, when I bought a particular plant, so how long I've actually been growing the plant for, and so on. Also, of course, it's a fantastic time now during the winter months to be doing a bit of research, reading in literature and on the web, about existing plants in the collection, perhaps about potential future plants. So, what are plants that would be fantastic to have on the wish list? And so, doing that research, that's something, of course, for this period of cool, dark, rainy days, and then later in the winter, the dark, snowy, cold days. At the moment, there's quite a number of my aloes that are in full bloom. So that's really quite nice to always have them during the winter months. And they bring in, a little bit of color. And it's really quite nice to have at least some blooms in between the sleeping cacti. Amazingly, there is hidden behind this beautiful Parodia Lenninghausi. Let me just try and get in between cacti there and go to the back. Look at that. There is actually a flowering Cleistocactus. It's a hybrid, and it is, despite this time of the year and despite this horrible, dark, bleak weather, it is actually presenting this absolutely stunning bloom. Look at that. Let me just try and get a bit closer to give you an idea. Don't know whether the camera will still focus properly there. It's focusing in and out. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get this in focus a little bit better. Get a little bit closer. There you go. What is actually also amazing to see is that a number of cacti are, although it's still months until we get into the next growing season, but a number of our cacti are already actually starting to form their buds. You might be able to see that here, these darkish colored dots around the central growth axis, those are actually tiny little buds, the first signs of buds that will then grow in the spring to become new blooms, new flowers. But amazing to see how, months in advance, quite a number of these buds will already be visible. And that means this is, as I've said earlier, this is a really key period for cacti, because it's actually this cool period is a trigger to have the plants develop buds and then flowers for the next growing season. So very often, if cacti are actually, even though they might be, mature enough, old enough to be flowering, if they're kept in rather warm temperatures during the winter months, in a warm, heated living room, for instance, maybe on the windowsill, then in many cases those cacti will actually not develop buds and then flowers at all, sadly. I've also got a number of Thanksgiving and Christmas cacti growing here, and oh look, actually, oh, that's amazing. I hadn't seen this yesterday. It's the first flower that has opened from this beautiful, beautiful plant that is covered in buds, and will be, as we move into late November and into December, we'll have this entire plant covered in beautiful blooms. Amazingly, also, the Epiphyllum Ackermanni has been flowering all year and still has a whole number of its beautiful buds, which will gradually open to the huge red blooms that this beautiful epiphytic cactus has. Well, I hope I could give you a little bit of an idea of the things that go on in my collection, in my greenhouse, during this winter break period, when there's relatively little going on with regard to growth and flowering with the plants. Nevertheless, quite a lot of activity, quite a lot of things that need to be done, and hopefully you got a little bit of an idea of those in my collection anyway. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then of course I'd be very happy if you clicked a like, and equally, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, a great way of supporting would be to subscribe. So please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon so that you get automatic notifications of every new upload to the channel. Thanks so much for joining today. Thanks so much. And as always, wishing you not just happy growing, but also happy dormancy.